necessarily understand what comes next. Who's going to, are you going to be believed? The single biggest start by believing. The benefit says start by believing. If someone discloses or goes to report sexual violence and they're not believed, it's a slippery slope once you're not believed. The three things, the 3 Ds: disbelieve, discount, dismiss, and off you go. No charges are going ahead then. And if that same disclosure to a friend or family member.
I believe the percentage is in the 90s that people are disbelieved.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very high.
So redefining justice is about the actual justice system, isn't it?
No, it's about social justice. It's about all forms of
Isn't it about accountability?
Pardon?
Accountability, because you get fines for parking in the wrong space, but not for hitting women and children.
Yes. Well, in some cases you do, but...
Well, very few actually. It's less than 11%.
Well, you've got to get into the police station to report it first, so...
It's very dangerous to report it, because the police, 90%, over 90%, don't listen to you.
Now, while this is an interesting interaction here...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We've just got to start, so if people want to submit questions, please feel free to do that, and we'll have engagement at the end.
You've got other people, you've got, if your support system, if your friends are not supporting you, if your religion says something different, if you are going to be ostracised by your family, if you're reporting someone in your family has sexually assaulted you, it's likely to divide the family. He wouldn't do that. I don't believe that. So there's a myriad of things that are barriers to reporting, both socially and in the system itself.
I think there are also some really basic things that we expect to happen now that still don't. So, for example, having a female available. So if you do get to the point where you're reporting that there's actually a woman you get to speak to rather than two males, like there are some basic barriers in our system that could be easily taken away if we really start to procedure and process as well. And the shame is still so much attached to sexual assault and sexual violence. So I've always found in my work, women will tell you so many things about what happens to them physically, but the sexual assault is often the last thing once there's a lot of trust, because that shame is so if anything in the system reinforces that sense of shame, that's when people get shut down and they won't report, they won't go any further.
We've also, so we've got a question that's come in. If money wasn't an object, which was an interesting interpretation that I originally had through, but I won't read to you what we had originally. What would the ideal education campaign be? Diana, you've got a lot of strong views about how to make sure that we have appropriate investment and the right types of education, particularly in schools. But you're right, it's not just in schools.
No,
what would you do?
It's not. It's multifaceted. I mean, the biggest thing that we can do as a society is model good behaviour. It starts in the home. If you're modelling respectful relationships, if you're modelling that in your home, it's more likely that your children will accept that. That's the way they're socialised. It's different if that's not modelled in the home, and then suddenly it's the school's problem to educate those children about respectful relationships. And so they get that at school, and then they go home and get something completely different. It's about aligning all our messages, and we're not there yet. We've got to be able to educate our own children in our own families. The school should be an extension of that. The faith groups, the media, everything should be an extension of it. We're a long way from that, but if you had...
Well, it's such a joke, isn't it? Because there's not even a fine for the perpetrator. I think a long way from it is maybe taking their licence off them or fining them. I mean, we talk about justice, but when there's no consequence, like again, a parking fine, you have no consequence, and the man comes home every time, and even when he breaches, he comes home every time. You don't give him exclusional laws, you don't give him 30-day penalties out of the home, and the shame is put on the victim instead of the thug and the perpetrator, and by proxy you support the perpetrator. Now, I told you of a corrupt prosecutor who I'm having investigated, and you said it's got nothing to do with you, and on your website it says that you are for reform. So if I'm taking to task a corrupt prosecutor and you serve the Domestic Violence Prevention Centre people and you say it's not to do with us, it's not in our realm, how are you redefining justice by not supporting a corrupt prosecutor who is in the community supporting offenders?
Now, I'm really mindful that there's a number of people individually in the room who have individual matters. There are privacy obligations that our panellists need to adhere to that mean that they can't respond.
How convenient, because the problem is you're not policing things.
Because they're not the police, darling.
But why change laws when those laws have no consequences?
The question was, if money was no limit, how would we create a
Fair enough.
system? So I guess it's turning some of those negatives that you're talking about, how do we change those to positives and build them into a system that's going to protect people, keep people safe and hold offenders.
People are not safe if there's no consequences.
And that's what I said, and hold offenders accountable.
We need to hold the justice system accountable, who makes most of the money off the violence. Like the 49,000 people that are employed to work in the industry, to perpetuate the machine.
And look, I think we're all here to try and make sure that our justice system...
But it's not.
And I'm happy to have a conversation, maybe afterwards.
Well, everybody should know that only 11% of people are incarcerated. And you can breach. Fair enough.
My office is up at Macleod. We can grab your details. And anyone else who wants to talk about individual matters.
No, I'm talking about the community.
Yeah. All right. So if anyone wants to put any questions forward, we've got the QR code here. I am mindful we've had a number of people who have also submitted through the process. So I might hand over to you, Lucy, for our next question. So the next question we had here was in relation to... particularly, so this person has written that, I'll read the entire thing out. I'm deeply concerned about the rise in popularity of the manosphere by figures like Andrew Tate, and I am confident in fighting against this stuff on an individual level, but how do we see the overarching change we need to fight back against this misogyny on a societal level?
Make consequences.
Oh, sorry.
That's again, small questions tonight. I think one of the things that, for me, and I always feel conflicted doing this, but I think really celebrating the men who are willing to work with us and stand up and role model good behaviour to boys and to girls as well. And I think there's always going to be the Andrew Tates of the world and the men who perpetrate particular stereotypes about women. But it's the men in our society who actually are willing to do the right thing and display the right behaviours, are having those conversations, standing up for women, talking to their friends, publishing things on social media. That's how we change that societal approach. And it's a really tough one because I think sometimes we get so far, particularly in the feminist space, and there is a massive pushback and swing back. And I keep trying to remind myself that, that phrase that the darkest hours is before the dawn. We've come so far. And so it is staying the course. It's continuing to ask men to be accountable, to stand up. It's women continuing to stand up for ourselves. It's joining those campaigns. It's sharing things on social media. It's having the conversation with children. When I was at a football game the other day and my son had his mate next to him, and his friend said a certain word and screamed it out as a football player, and I saw my son turn around and just go, and he went, oh, and he didn't say it again for the game. And I was so proud, but we need lots of men doing that, because there were all men in the crowd and their mates weren't holding them accountable for what they were saying. But I do feel like there are laws coming that will restrict things in social media for kids. Like if those federal laws that have been talked about come through, it will reduce that exposure for children as well to really bad messaging. But it's the adults in community having to stand up and speak out. And it's a tough one because we're going to have to shift the whole society one of the things that I often heard from Rosie Buddy was that it took 50 to 60 years to change the smoking. You used to be able to smoke in an office, you used to be able to smoke in a plane. It was a long, long journey to get there to make smoking socially not acceptable. We've got to stay the course in the same thing, have those campaigns and really stick to our guns around, well, that's the most violent analogy, Lucy, stick to what we mean about respecting women and upholding equal rights, and really encouraging the young men to think differently through role models. I think that's the key.
Look, I think, again, we need to be the change that we want to see. If we start that role modeling and if we surround ourselves with people doing the right thing, there is a ripple effect. In 2025, there's so much more influence around for young people. You know, social media, everyone's got it. Everyone's got, you know, the kids have got their iPads at 2. And it's a porn-saturated society that just fuels all that hatred and violence against women. So if we need to hold fast and be true to ourselves, be the change that we want to see, and have those ripple effects around us. So then that goes out to the schools, to the media. You know, we've got changes for the media, social media at a federal, obviously at a federal level. Be interesting to see what change it makes. It's, you know, cautiously optimistic. It's a huge thing. It's not an offline and online kind of world. It's meshed. We live in that world that's here and out there. It's seamless. It's not rules for offline and online. And, you know, young people have not known any different. They've not known any different. Their world has been that big and that heavy and surrounding them 24/7. The bullying doesn't finish at school. It's online when they come home. So very interesting and challenging times, but I think we do have to hold strong. We do have to be the change that we want to be. We have to seek out the right people to do the right things, to make the world the way we want it to be.
Well, like the police.
For our children and grandchildren, not for the police, for our children and grandchildren.
Aren't they who you turn to?
The next question we have here is, what can we do as everyday folks to make change in our community, and how do we help pressure the government to stay the course that you were sort of talking to before, Di?
Well, probably I answered some of that then. And it's, if you feel strongly about something, you know, check it out with your friends and family. Other people will probably feel the same way. Is that the way you start a group? What organisations can you support? You know, our organisations doing different activities. Is there ways that you can support them? It might not be. It could be financially. It could be turning up at an event to help out. There's a range of things that you can do as an individual. You can go to your local member if it's a, you know, a council, state or federal member. Get it on the agenda. We've got to use our voices. We've got to use our voices for good, because there's plenty of people out there with voices that aren't for good. So we need to have a groundswell of being louder, of the good voices being louder. So find your people, find your group, find your village. You know, pull that closely around you and do good. And there's people in this room now that are doing that individually in their organisations, and then we join up and support each other. And I think that's the way forward at grassroots level.
Thanks, Diane. Lucy, I suppose, how do people understand what the position is of organisations like yours, and then hopefully assist in some of the advocacy that you're doing? Because I am very mindful that often I think people working in this sector are really overworked, and there are sometimes very powerful voices out there, you know, with a contrary view, and it's difficult to cut through, and difficult for, I think, people in this room sometimes to even know how can they help to get the reform that we need. So how can people best assist your organisation?
I think in terms of assisting our organisation, one of the things we've stepped more into the space of being more public. And so coming to events like this and talking to us and telling us that our work is valued We recently had a gentleman who he walked 80 kilometres in 80 days. He walked 80 kilometres in 4 days at age 80 to raise funds for our organisation, and it was in honour of his granddaughter who had been killed by her partner. And it was a heartbreaking thing to see, but what was beautiful to see were the hundreds of people that came out to support him, but also that we got to see that there were people in the community that supported the cause and understood what we were doing and valued what we were doing, because all of the money he raised he donated to us, which then we utilised to provide emergency accommodation for women, or food hampers, or whatever it was that women needed at the time. So I think it's joining in those campaigns when you can, joining in campaigns online. Obviously we've got social media sites where we advertise the things that we are doing and things that are going on. But having also worked in government, what I can say is that when ministers get letters about things, they do read them and they do respond, and they do send them to people who work in government to say, what is our position on this, how can we respond? So the campaign where you are sending letters and you are telling the government that you don't agree with their position, they actually don't go unheard. If there's a huge groundswell of people saying, actually I don't agree with this policy, they have to at least respond. They have to at least acknowledge. And so when I think about all the submissions you can make, all the campaigns, all the things that you can join in, they actually make an impact, because we used to get all those letters to respond on behalf of the minister about what the government was doing and all those things. So I think there's the power in writing, but also in following what we do on social media, coming to the events, but also sharing what we're doing and helping us to raise awareness in our community. I think about things like the rally that you have, Reclaim the Night is a really powerful event, and we have obviously the remembrance ceremony, which is in May during DV Prevention Month. So there's lots of ways to get involved and come to events and learn more and bring others along too. And when, as a worker, you see people out there joining in, you know that your work is not in vain, you know community supports you, and that really helps.
Thank you. We have a question, I'll read the second part of this question, which is, how can you prove a criminal offence when a victim themselves denies the offence? Now, I know PPDs don't require victim consent, and there's a range of reasons why a complaint might be made and then that person makes a decision not to continue. Can you talk us through, I suppose, why the law is currently the way it is, or why you might think it needs to change, and I suppose how we as a society deal with the issue that I suppose has been put forward, but the importance of, I suppose, victims having agency over what ultimately happens to them, but I suppose the shades of grey in the legal system in responding to those matters. Yeah. It's a very different question.
Is it reporting and recanting in sexual violence, or is it reporting and deciding that you don't want to go ahead? No, I was just trying to clarify the question. So I'm not sure whether disclosing, reporting sexual violence and then recanting. I wasn't sure if it was that type of question which we sometimes get with children, that people recant what they've said for a whole lot of reasons, but usually it's not safe enough for them to go forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that it did not happen. So we need to be really careful about someone's safety in that space, and I guess the domestic violence, if people are reporting and they decide, I want to drop those charges, I don't want to go ahead with that application, well, what's sitting behind that? So I don't know, victimless prosecution, did you want to talk about that? No.
I think the ethos that we work from is that there has been so much power and control over a woman when she's experiencing domestic violence. We are not going to continue that power and control over as a system and as a service. And there are so many reasons why someone might want to tell the police what has happened, but then not want to actually proceed with criminal charges. And it can be down to concerns about what's going to happen to that person, concerns about what might happen to them if that person does go to jail, and retribution. It may be a financial reason, or it may be actually they just don't believe in that. Maybe at the time they called police because they wanted to be safe. not because they wanted criminal charges to proceed. And we know that if we insist to make decisions without the victim survivor consenting and agreeing, we're probably creating more danger for her. And so we need to be supportive of whatever her decision is around whether she decides she doesn't want to go and give evidence at court. For anyone who's been to court and given evidence, it's one of the most harrowing things you can go through. And so if you change your mind on that, we will support you. It doesn't mean, like Di said, that we don't believe it, we don't think it happened, but we always need to allow women to make that decision about how their life proceeds, because they've had years of someone controlling their life, and we're not going to do that to them, and it's not unsafe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just really curious about how we can approach that as frontline workers, because I used to work in the emergency department, and I used to see a couple of cases like that. And as frontline workers, we want to help, but if they have so-called Stockholm syndrome or better spouse syndrome, it drives us off the wall as well, because our hands are tied legally as well. You know what I mean? Like, there's only so much we can do. So, what would you recommend, for frontline workers?
That is par for the course, I think, for anyone who's in a relationship. People don't get into relationships for any reason other than they're seeking love and companionship. And so when you are seeing someone come forward who has changed their mind about how they want to proceed, I would say that it's actually not about us as service system workers, and actually doesn't matter if we're frustrated. We need to turn up every single day and do the same thing every single time that person comes to us. We believe in them every time, we support them every time, because eventually they might actually have the confidence to proceed if they know the system's got them. But it's actually not about us, and we just need to hold that frustration. That's why we have supervision, that's why we have training, that's why we have a group team where we can talk that stuff out and debrief, because it's actually about her and her journey and not about us. And I think that's hard. It's easy to say sitting here right now today, but just reminding ourselves of that every time. And when you can understand that people have to make the decisions in their lives. I don't live with the decision that a woman makes. She lives with it forever. I have like 10, 15, 20 minutes of her life in front of me. It's not actually my decision whether that's the right decision or not. It's not my judgment. It's not about me, because I get to go home, but she's going to live that life.
But it's not about her, it's about the behaviour.
That level of frustration is not the frustration about her, it's the frustration of not being able to do something to help.
Exactly.
Positive change. And I guess when you've got the person in front of you, if you're a health worker, as you treat what's in front of you, you believe and you support her, you can have a conversation. If that person is heard, believed and treated respectfully, they may well come back. They might seek assistance in other ways where they can get help. If they keep getting a consistent message, I'm really sorry that this has happened to you. This should not be happening to you. This is not okay. But you're still treating them. In your ED situation, I just want to say something about something that happened years ago when I worked in Women's Refuge. A certain Women's Refuge that I won't mention, who said that women can't keep coming back to Women's Refuge. Well, why do you think they're coming back to Women's Refuge?
There's no justice.
Because they have experienced violence again and they need safe accommodation. So in my 10 years in Women's Refuge, one woman came back 37 times. 37 times. And one would think that she might be becoming more and more vulnerable, but she was becoming stronger because she learned to trust that she could come to the refuge. She learned to trust the support around her, and she got on board a little bit more information every time and a bit more support. And it was only just in the last, about 8 years ago, I got a phone call at work at the Sexual Assault Service saying, I saw your name, I saw you on TV the other night, I just had to ring and tell you that guess what I'm doing now? I'm a social worker. And I'm working in the area of domestic violence in another part of Australia, and the children who we were so concerned about are both professional people doing well in their lives and their relationship and their professional lives. So 37 times has had to be the biggest kind of return to refuge I've ever heard of. That woman took those pieces, put them all together and carved out a life for herself because she was believed and supported and treated respectfully.
If she was believed and supported, he would have been incarcerated.
Sorted out long before she came 37 times.
Exactly.
What happened to the partner that was doing harm to her all that 37 times?
Exactly.
There was no domestic violence legislation then. It was prior to domestic violence.
Oh, it's the same as now.
If he's harming her, isn't that an assault?
Well,
it doesn't matter how.
If he's physically assaulted her, it will be assault.
Exactly, she has to come back because she's not protected.
I understand there was no legislation and there wasn't.
It's the same today.
So if there's physical violence before the domestic violence legislation, of course it's assault. There'd be an assault charge if that charge was...
They don't get charged. Exactly.
Now, I think
I'm happy to talk to you about it.
We'll do it. We'll
about that.
and I'm mindful that we're coming very close to having to wrap up. So I and a number of people will be hanging around here to talk further because these are all really complicated, nuanced.
No, it's very simple. There's no accountability.
Over a long period of time when the law has changed, which does make it...
Doesn't matter if the laws change if there's no consequence.
And that's precisely why we're here this evening to talk about why we can get good law reform to make sure that there is justice.
But law reform has to be backed by the police.
The last question that I've got that came through that I wanted to really briefly touch on before I go to our panellists for any concluding remarks. The question was, what if a woman gets pregnant through rape and only gets to know about it later through her pregnancy and she doesn't want to give birth? This was a conversation we had, I think, at the last forum. So abortion was actually a crime in Queensland until 2018. I, in fact, was the only Gold Coast Member of Parliament other than Jean Stuckey, who was no longer in the Parliament, who actually voted to remove that as a criminal offence and instead treat it as a health issue. So now women at least have some form of agency to be able to go and get a termination of pregnancy, although there are still many barriers in place for women to be able to get agency over their own bodies. And so I might just see if either of our panellists have anything further to add on that particular topic, but also to conclude, I suppose, and letting everyone know, I suppose, one thing that you think would be helpful for us all to do that can deliver, the sort of reform that we need in this state. Before I come to you, Lucy, I'll also just mention on the termination of pregnancy changes that came in, there has been a decision by government to not allow any conversation further about termination of pregnancy laws, which in some ways means that at least it can't be wound back necessarily this term, but it also means no progress can be made. So if there are any advancements in medicine, it means that we're not able to make those changes. So, for example, we made some changes to allow nurses to prescribe and midwives to prescribe MS2-step in the early stages of pregnancy. Really important in regional Queensland for women to be able to access that reform. That happened after we decriminalised abortion, which shows the law can't be stagnant. We have to keep changing as new technologies come about and when we know there are problems. So I think it's unfortunate that we've now been effectively gagged from talking about that issue in Parliament, but we'll continue to advocate where there may be advancements, where we think there needs to be a reform at a legislative level. I'll just give you some context on that.
Well, the question about pregnancy as a result of rape, that certainly it's the woman's decision about termination, and at this point in time, it's decriminalised in Queensland, so it's her choice to be the father might be. It'll be the woman's choice, as it should be, around her own body. Luckily, we're not in the United States. I'll go to you while I think about the one thing that I need to say.
So you're asking me about the one thing that I want people to take away. I think we need to just keep having the difficult conversations. If there are things that are unacceptable, if there are things that we don't agree with, that we keep talking it through. There are no simple answers. We all have our limits and our boundaries of what we can achieve. But I think if we keep talking, we keep advocating, we keep having the conversation, conversation, then at least it won't go away. At least we can try and create solutions. I think what I've learnt is that we have to do it together. So I might not be able to do certain piece, but somebody else here can. So how do we work together to hopefully resolve things? There isn't a way to fix everything. There are, certain agencies that are laws unto themselves. We don't have independent commissions that can review judicial decisions outside of appellable laws. Like there are lots of parts of society that we can't change, but we can at least advocate for it and we can keep talking about it. I'm mindful of a quote about difficult women, and that actually if you're labelled a difficult woman or someone who asks too many hard questions, you're probably asking the right ones and you've got to keep going. So I want us to keep talking and keep advocating together.
Well, maybe there should be fines like parking fines.
Okay, I think, yes, I agree. It's about joining together and the saying, one voice is powerful, but many voices make the change. And it is about doing things together, like finding your group, finding your people, finding your village, move forward together. We can carve out a society that we want to live in, and we want our children and grandchildren to live in, and family members beyond that to live in the future. But it's up to us now. Like, we have got to be, what we're doing now will be the future for our children and grandchildren. That's what they're going to inherit. So we've got a role and a responsibility as a citizen to look at safety and accountability and what do we want our world to look like. And it is about keeping on. And sometimes you think, I'm so tired of saying the same thing over and over again. And at last year's Reclaim the Night, that's what my banner, my placard said, still here, still marching. Because some of the same things just come back again, or you think they're solved, and it's about holding that line. If you're caught dozing, we can easily go backwards. So it's about moving forward, carving the type of society that we want. What do we want in our future? Because we need to be working towards it today, individually and collectively.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of our panellists. I know you do incredible work every day, and you're here this evening volunteering your time to talk about these issues. So on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to thank our panellists for everything they do. And just to wrap up, if anyone does have any issues that you wanted to talk to my office about, our team are here to both Lucy and Di's point. Progress can be really hard. Law reform takes time, and it can be frustratingly slow sometimes. But when you do get things moving and when you get outcomes, it makes a really big difference. And it only happens because of usually individuals like the two women on this stage and people here advocating and also using your influence. I think the great thing about democracy is that we all have the same one vote. So Clive Palmer gets one vote and you get one vote, and that's, I think, the great thing about democracy is that we all get to have our say at the ballot box, but also as citizens, making those points to your elected members of parliament and to other organisations where you need to elevate those issues. So please don't undervalue how significant your voice really is as well. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Please stay and enjoy drinks and mingle with everyone. Thank you.